Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I think you covered everything about me. Yeah, you just asked for me to give a bit of an introduction about how I got into conservation. So quick summary for those who are interested in starting a conservation career. I did a zoology degree at Edinburgh, then ended up doing jobs varying from studying tracking Chapman baboons in South Africa, studying their behaviour, doing a census of the St. Lucian parrot in the Caribbean, worked as an ecologist, moving great crested newts off the Thames Gateway in Essex. Yeah, just various field work and voluntary positions until I landed on my feet and got the job on Skomer, monitoring the seabirds out there for 2 seasons, which is, yeah, just one of the best jobs going. Highly recommend it. And then I did a master's in wildlife management and conservation at Reading, and then through more volunteering with the RSPB, eventually landed myself a job with them, and I've been with them now for 11 years. So a lot of the work I've done with them is on seabirds. So I spent 4 years working on the Future of the Atlantic Marine Environment project, which was catching seabirds and attaching tiny GPS devices to them to find out where they were going to feed, to help inform where marine protected areas should go. So that was carried out around the UK, including some tracking work carried out by Steve Dodd on Puffin Island. And then, yeah, I've been working on this Biosecurity for Life project, which has been going on since 2018. So it's a 5-year project that's coming to an end next year. And it's a partnership project with RSPB, National Trust and National Trust for Scotland. And it's funded by the EU with support from the statutory agencies. Yeah, so I'll talk about that now. That slide's going to move. For some reason, oh, there we go. Now it's probably going to move about 6 slides all at once, isn't it? Hopefully not. Yeah, the UK is a maritime nation, so UK waters cover 4 times the area of UK land, and we have some really strong oceanic currents surrounding us, bringing in relatively mild water and relatively mild winters our way. And this warm water mixes with our nutrient-rich cold water and provides the perfect conditions for plankton to thrive, which are the building blocks of all life in our seas. So yeah, they obviously feed the fish, which then fuel our spectacular seabird cities. So yeah, you find lots of seabird colonies around our coastline and on offshore islands. And I always say that they're the equivalent of our Serengeti or Great Barrier Reef, like that we're internationally important for breeding seabird colonies, and we've got a huge responsibility to protect them. So we have over 8 million breeding seabirds around our shores in the summer season. That's for UK and Ireland, and there's 26 different species of birds that breed around our coast. So I'm sure lots of you will have visited a seabird colony and just been overwhelmed by the assault on your senses, by the smell, the sound and the sight. Yeah, they're just really magic places. So yeah, we hold 80% of the world's breeding Manx shearwater, and 60% of those are in Wales alone, which is just staggering numbers. Also 60% of great skuas breed in Scotland alone. There's 56% of northern gannet breed in the UK, along with 34% of the world's population of European shag, and 20% of the world's breeding razorbill population. So we're a really important site for seabirds. Unfortunately, as a lot of you will be aware, seabirds have been in decline. So since 1986, they've declined by 24%. And these declines have been higher in certain areas. So Scotland suffered particularly badly, and certain species have suffered as well. So more than others, I mean. So like the Arctic skua pictured here has declined by 80% in that period, which is just really scary. So they're under pressure from quite a few fronts. They are caught accidentally as bycatch in fishing gear. Is somebody not on mute? Or sorry. And they also suffer from a lack of food availability due to overfishing and climate change. They have a risk of directly colliding with offshore renewables, and they also have the risk of invasive non-native species predating on their eggs and chicks, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So this infographic was produced just this year, but it doesn't even mention the avian influenza, because it wasn't a massive thing in the seabird world until this year, but it's really spread from the industrial poultry industry, with devastating effect. Yeah, it's all starting to sound a bit doom and gloom, but hopefully my project or the talk about the projects I work on will bring a bit of positivity, because we're working on reducing one of those pressures. So we're reducing the chance of invasive non-native mammalian predators like rats, mice, mink, feral cat, stoat and hedgehog reaching seabird islands where they aren't already present and eating the eggs and chicks of seabirds. So burrow nesting species such as storm petrels, Manx shearwater and Atlantic puffin are particularly vulnerable to invasive mammalian predators because they nest underground. So you'll get these amazing cliff nesting colonies of seabirds on the UK mainland, and they are safe from invasive predators to some extent because of their vertiginous dwelling. Whereas these species are particularly vulnerable and are mainly found on offshore islands, which have historically been free of mammalian predators. So the Biosecurity for Life project came about following the successful eradication of black rats from the Shant Islands in 2015 to 2016. So that's a group of islands in Scotland between the Outer Hebrides and Skye. And as part of that work, they carried out an audit of seabird special protection area islands in the UK to see what biosecurity measures were in place and how we were protecting these islands from invasive predators. And they basically found that not a lot was being done and not enough was being done. So we were spending huge amounts of money on these really complex and logistically challenging eradication projects, but not actually spending any money on stopping these invasive predators reaching these special islands in the first place. So even after an eradication's been successful, you need biosecurity measures in perpetuity to make sure that an invasive predator doesn't reinvade. So Biosecurity for Life has been working on raising awareness about what biosecurity is and trying to make biosecurity measures, preventative measures, the norm. Yeah, so rats are one of the most successful invasive mammals. They've reached about 80% of the world's islands. And one of the main reasons they've done that is as stowaways on boats. And it's not just large vessels we're talking about. They can squeeze through a gap of 12 millimeters. So it's often just down to luck that these invasive predators haven't reached these islands. So there's like reports of rangers in New Zealand finding mice in the rucksack of unsuspecting tourists visiting seabird islands. And we've got a story in the UK of an unsuspecting conservationist carrying a rat in their rucksack, which they hadn't realised they'd picked up when they'd left their rucksack open. They'd sat down to have some lunch, left their sandwiches exposed, left their bag alone for a bit, came back, picked it up, carried it away, and then realised that they were carrying a rat around. So although these events seem really unlikely, they do happen, and they only have to happen once for there to be a major problem. Yeah, another reason that the rats are so successful is because they can swim over a mile easily and over double that distance sometimes, and they can hold their breath for 3 minutes. So quite often if you speak to people who work on boats, well, once you start talking to people about invasive predators, you hear like all of these stories come out of the woodwork basically, and everybody seems to have a story. And quite often if people find them on a boat, they would just kick them overboard, thinking that they've got rid of the problem. But obviously then they could swim to the nearest landmass, which might be a special seabird island, or they could swim to some debris and then float an even like longer distance. And even the small house mouse can swim over 500 meters, which is pretty impressive. Yeah, so if you're thinking, oh, surely stowaways are a thing of the past, they're not. So this is all the incidents that have affected the UK Special Protection Area seabird islands that we work on since the project started in 2018. So there's been 20 incidents, including this yacht shown here, which lots of you will have heard about, I imagine, as that was grounded on some rocks off the Skerries. And yeah, also, so it only takes one pregnant female rat to reach a seabird island to produce a colony of 300 individuals in 8 months. So even one individual can cause huge problems. And that has actually happened on the Welsh Islands. So on Skomer, a rat jumped on shore from a boat in the first half of the 20th century. And thankfully was dealt with quickly. But yeah, it's a very real risk that people don't really realise until they start thinking about it. And that's happened again more recently on St Agnes and Gu in the Scilly Isles. So during the course of this project, a rat was seen jumping from a boat onto the island, and they carried out a successful eradication there in 2013. So if it wasn't for some swift thinking of somebody on the quay, you know, the positive impacts of that eradication could have been reversed very quickly. So yeah, we just need everybody to be very vigilant all the time. And another incident that's affected a Welsh island is the Elbe Carrier cargo container ship, which had some shipping containers go overboard during a storm off Grasholm in 2019, and the debris from that washed up on Skomer and Skokum and all along the Pembrokeshire coast, all the way up as far north as the Thlin Peninsula. And yeah, without surveillance in place, we wouldn't have been able to identify whether anything had stowed away on that debris onto these islands, but thankfully it hadn't, but there is the possibility there. Yeah, so if we take a step back, so biosecurity is the actions we take to protect islands from invasive predators. So we aim to prevent their arrival in the first place, but failing that, we aim to detect an incursion early on so that we can respond quickly and prevent it turning into an invasion, which is where they're reproducing. So the Biosecurity for Life project is focused on improving and implementing biosecurity measures on all 42 offshore island special protection areas in the UK that are designated for breeding seabirds. And I cover Wales and Northern Ireland, so I cover 5 special protection area sites in both countries, but I'll just focus on Wales today. So starting in the north, there's Puffin Island, which is privately owned and managed by NRW. It holds 1% of the Northwest European great cormorant population. And I don't know how many of you know, but there was a successful rat eradication back in 1999. But unfortunately, our recent trips to the island have discovered that rats have actually returned to the island and are established there again. So that's something that NRW are hopefully looking to address next year. But it is going to be tricky because the island is less than 400 meters from the mainland. So it is within swimming distance, although there is a relatively strong current separating the island from the mainland most of the time. It is still a higher risk of re-invasion. And after the last eradication, biosecurity measures and biosecurity surveillance weren't really the norm. So they weren't put in place, so we weren't able to identify when the island was re-invaded and do something about it, whereas the whole success of any future eradication will depend on getting really good biosecurity measures in place, making sure that everybody's aware of the issues and everybody's keeping their eye out for an invasive predator re-invading the island, so that a response could be carried out quicker before a population starts to reproduce again. So that will be key. Another island off Anglesey which we're working on is the Skerries. That's an RSPB reserve. It's the largest Arctic tern colony in the UK, and it's also nationally important for sandwich tern, common tern and roseate tern. It's a very noisy place to be. And yeah, not all of the islands that we're working on are uninhabited. So we're also working on Bardsey, which has a community living on it. So it was designated for its important Manx shearwater population. It's the 3rd largest colony in the UK. So we've been working with the community there to improve biosecurity measures, because everybody needs to be involved for it to be successful. Going further south down to Pembrokeshire, there's another RSPB reserve, Grassholm, which is the 3rd largest gannet colony in the UK. It was the only gannet colony in Wales until recently. And yeah, that's where Greg Morgan is going to be coming and giving his talk about in December. He's the site manager for this site, so I've been working with him closely. And then further south is the SPA that contains Skomer, Skomer and Middlehome, and these islands collectively hold over half the world's population of breeding Manx shearwater. They also are globally important for their Atlantic puffin numbers and lesser blackback gull, and nationally important for European storm petrel and just generally having loads of seabirds on them. So that's the 5 sites I'm working on. If we break down, look at the 3 different aims of biosecurity now. So if we look at prevention first, which is where you all come in. So what we have to do is we have to put barriers on the pathways by which invasive predators can reach these islands. So something like a mouse can stow away in a vessel ranging from a kayak to a car ferry. It can stow away in a compartment of a boat or in personal baggage. So it's just putting barriers, trying to put barriers in place on all of those pathways to stop it being able to do that. So obviously a key part of improving biosecurity in the UK is raising awareness about it and doing education work. So we want everybody to know what biosecurity is for starters, and we want everybody to know what quick checks they can carry out to help our seabird islands. So whenever people are out visiting a seabird island, or even if they're just passing in close proximity to one, we say to check your boats, check your cargo, check your baggage, check your vehicle, just check. And what you're checking, so these are like some of the materials that we've produced. They're posters and leaflets and the stickers for boat operators and kayakers as well. And what we're asking people to check for are these signs of stowaways, so entrance holes, droppings, nest material and gnaw marks. And we say to people to keep your boat or your vehicle tidy and to store food in rodent-proof containers to reduce the attraction of an invasive predator wanting to get onto the vessel or into your bag. Where possible, to pack your bag on the day of travel and don't leave it unattended, particularly in high-risk areas like marinas and harbours. So we've been reiterating this message in interpretation panels at marinas and harbours around the UK. So hopefully this consistent messaging will get into people's headspace, and it'll just become a thing that everybody just thinks twice about before boarding a boat. So we've also been producing these boat operator information sheets. So we do this for yacht operators, tour boat operators and fishing boat operators. And they just have quick checks that people can carry out to help keep our island safe. So things like rat guards, shown on the bottom right here, they're just really cheap plastic discs that you put on your mooring lines and your anchor chains, and they mean that rodents can't climb up the rope and board your vessel that way, because they can even swim out and then climb up your mooring line that way if you don't have a rat guard in place. So rat guards are commonly used in commercial shipping worldwide, but they're not very common in like smaller leisure craft, and we're trying to change that and make it so that they're just used as standard. One of the other things we suggest is using an open tender to land on a seabird island, because there's obviously less places for something to hide, although you obviously still need to make sure that your bags that you're taking on board are well checked. And this is the back of the boat operator information sheet. So that has some information about what you should do at the start of the season, like additional checks and setting up rodent surveillance for the season ahead. So installing chew cards, which can act as an early warning system that you've got something on board your vessel, and also snap traps to deal with something if it did get on board. And it's obviously not just personal boating that is poses a risk. We've also been working and training the marine industries and businesses. So we've been working with tour boat operators, harbour masters, fishing boat operators and the Lighthouse Board, and training people in checks that they can carry out. And we've also been installing protector boxes, which are black bait boxes, with rodenticide in on vessels that directly go to the seabird islands that we're working on, so they can again act as a barrier to an invasive predator reaching an island. We've worked with the WISE accreditation scheme, so we've got biosecurity included in their scheme now, so if you see that sticker on board a vessel, they should be carrying out good biosecurity measures, so feel free to check up on them and give them a lecture if not. And it's not just people out working on boats or people out on boats that we want to educate. We want to educate everybody, and we want to start early. So we've co-designed a curriculum-led education package. So it was kind of co-designed with 7 Scottish primary schools, and it's a free education package that has 6 different modules, and it's just really awesome because it was designed by the kids. It's just really engaging and creative, and there's like songs and outdoor activities and Lego stop animations and rap videos about rats, which is a bit of a tongue twister, and various games. So every primary school that signs up gets sent out this Monopoly style game teaching them about the amazing seabird islands around the UK, and what they can do to help. And that was originally just going to be rolled out in Scotland, but it was so successful up there, it's been translated into Welsh and Gaelic, and it's been rolled out in Wales this autumn. So that's really exciting. They did a much better job than we would have done designing it by ourselves. Our education work isn't just confined to the classroom. We've also, if you ever get up to Canna in the Inner Hebrides, there's a children's activity trail there where they pick up this Canna Explorer kit, and that has like A to Z cards of like facts and activities that they can carry out on the island, interspersed with like biosecurity messages. And if you get even further up north to Mousa in Shetland, there's a biosecurity warden trail where kids can pick up this kit and do our job for the day, basically. So that's really engaging ways of communicating the message. Obviously, a key part of our work is working with the people who live or work near these islands, so or own these islands, so landowners, communities, key stakeholders, and we've been working with them to write biosecurity plans, which are documents which give all the details about the island, pathways that people think an invasive predator might reach there, what we can do to reduce the chance of that happening, routine surveillance that we can put in place to identify if something does reach there and what the plan is going to be if something does reach them and we have to carry out an incursion response. So once those are in place, what is the routine surveillance that we've been setting up to carry out the detection of invasive predators? We've been setting up these tracking tunnels in the top right and tracking cameras in the middle. They're tricky to spot because they're camouflaged. And then these black protector boxes, which have got these wax tube locks in. So we've been setting these surveillance equipment up on islands around the UK. So this is some examples of signs that you might find. So in the top right, rat and mouse tracks in the tracking tunnel. So it's just like a paper card and ink, and when something walks over it, they leave their tracks. And then these wax tube locks in the middle are non-toxic. They're just flavoured wax, and we flavour it with chocolate or aniseed or peanut butter or other enticing smells. And if something chews them, you can identify what species it is. So that it's a rat at the top picture and a mouse on the bottom picture. The rats are messier. Yeah, so these can be left out because they're non-toxic, but we put them in the black protector boxes because then it stops the non-target species eating them. And these things obviously need to be checked as regularly as is feasible, really, for them to be effective, so that you can respond quickly if you do find something. And it's really key for people to be keeping their eyes out for other signs as well. So like the chewed vegetation on the left shown here, or the droppings shown on the right, and you also get like chewed carcasses or rodent runs where they have like their commonly used paths, and also burrows where they nest. So it's not just passive surveillance devices that we're using. We've also trained a conservation detection dog, which is a really new thing for the UK. It's very exciting. So Greg Morgan, who's going to chat to you in December from Glassholm and Ramsey, he is a dog handler for our conservation detection dog, Jinx. And so they've just started doing operational searches. So they can do searches of like high risk building material being delivered to special protection area islands, and also do like routine searches on the islands just to carry out routine checks. So dogs are just awesome at smelling things. So Jinx is trained just to detect rats, and he is a lot better at doing it than we are. So it's very exciting to have him on board. And he's being used as a bit of a example of how this can be done. So he'll be doing like demos and stuff at marinas and ports. And yeah, hopefully in the future, you'll see more conservation detection dogs in the UK like you do in New Zealand. So what happens if one of our detection devices identifies that an invasive predator has reached an island? That's where the rapid incursion response comes in. So we're setting up a network of 8 rapid incursion response hubs around the UK. So there's going to be one on Anglesey and one in Pembrokeshire. And they're going to be places where all the kit can be stored to carry out the routine surveillance, and also to respond in the event of an incursion. And we're going to be training large volunteer teams similar to the Mountain Rescue or RNLI setup, so that there'll always be enough people able to respond within 48 hours if needed. So that's the aim, because time is of the essence. So yeah, if anybody is interested in joining that, either drop me an email or keep your eye on the RSPB volunteering pages this winter, because that will all be getting set up soon. So yeah, in 2 weeks' time, I'm meant to be driving up to Scotland to make 882 bait tunnels, which are shown in that bottom right image. and then driving them back down to the Welsh hubs. It's kind of like a team building exercise, hence the yeah, driving. But yeah, it's quite a lot of bait tunnels, so it's quite exciting to actually start getting that set up now. Yeah, so the reason that rapid incursion response couldn't be carried out on puffin when we found out that there were rats present was because we didn't know how long they'd been present for, and it seemed it wasn't just a handful of individuals, it was an established population. So hopefully with this rapid incursion response hub network, we should be able to respond quicker to any future incursions, so that we are dealing with the much smaller problems. So you end up setting out an intensive bait grid around a small area rather than carrying out an eradication of an entire island. So it's much quicker and simpler to carry out and saves a lot of money in the long run. So biosecurity is a lot cheaper to fund than eradication work, but you obviously need to fund it forever. So it's just not as sexy as eradications basically to get funding for. So there's a lot of work being carried out at the minute on the legacy side of the project, ensuring that this does carry on into the future, and not just carry on, but that it expands as well, because we want it to expand to like islands that aren't special protection areas, so islands that are triple SIs for seabirds, and yeah, we just want this to be the start of biosecurity in the UK, and we want the UK to be like New Zealand, where everybody knows what it is and what they should do to help with it. The more eyes, the better, basically. We just want everybody to be paranoid about it. And then, we'll be able to help protect these amazing places. So there's a short video which hopefully is going to work here. So you'll see this in ferry terminals around the UK, and it's just a bit of a summary of what I've just been talking about.
Save our seabirds. We need your help to protect seabirds through the action of biosecurity. The UK islands are internationally important for millions of seabirds. But our seabird populations are declining dramatically because of multiple threats. One threat is rodents on islands. They can wipe out entire seabird populations. Rodents are not native to UK seabird islands. So how do they get there? One of the ways they reach islands is as stowaways on board boats. They are particularly attracted to food and food waste. If you see a stowaway on board, do not land on a seabird island. Never push a stowaway overboard. Rats are very good swimmers. They have been known to swim at least 2 kilometers. So what simple actions can you take to prevent rodents reaching islands? Dispose of your rubbish and waste material responsibly. Pack food in rodent-proof containers. Check your baggage for signs of stowaways. Together, we can all carry out biosecurity actions and help protect our seabirds. Check your boat, check your cargo, check your baggage. To find out more, head to biosecurityforlife.org.uk.
Yeah, so one thing I forgot to mention before was that even though each boat trip is obviously a really low risk, it's the cumulative effect that's the problem. So there's 24.7 million boating experiences around the UK every year. So when you look at that figure and think of the low risk, but multiplied by all those boats, you realise that there is, a definite problem. So hopefully that talk has given you a summary of what biosecurity is and what we've been up to with this project, and hopefully you can now all be biosecurity ambassadors and tell everybody else about it. Keep in touch with us, there's our website on the top left, and we're also on Twitter or Instagram, and I'm happy for my email address to be shared around if people want to get in touch with me at a later stage. But from all the team shown here, thank you for listening, and any questions?
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tessa. That was great. A lot there that I certainly had not heard about. I'm sure the same applies to many of the people listening this evening. So please come forward. If you've got any questions for Tessa, send them through the chat or just ask them off the cuff now. So there we are. Gary's asking you to unmute and ask any questions that you have on the spot. Tessa, may I start by asking you about those biosecurity precautions that you ably describe? Am I right in thinking that they're all voluntary, none of those are mandatory?
Just realised I muted myself, sorry. Do you mean like carrying out checks of your baggage before visiting an island and stuff?
Yes, and those rat guards on boats.
Yeah, so everything is voluntary. So some places are like further along the biosecurity curve than others, basically. So places like Skomer they had started doing some biosecurity work before this project happened. So now if you book to go to Skomer, you get like an email detailing it all, and then you get asked about it when you get onto the boat. So it's still all voluntary, but then the boat, the skippers do have the authority to not allow you on the boat if you have an open bag, and they do that. So if you have like just like a carrier bag rather than a sealed rucksack or something, they do make you take everything out, look at it and put it in like a plastic, like not a bin bag, but you know, a thicker rubble sack type thing. So yeah, it's starting to become a bit more compulsory in some sites, which is really brilliant. Yeah, because that's what we need really. Yeah, because it's very low risk with every single trip, but it's just quite scary when you think of what can happen very quickly and how difficult it is to get rid of them as well. We had one male rat, thankfully, reach the Lamb in the Firth of Forth, and that took, it was during COVID, so it was a bit tricky that way anyway, but it did take over a year to track that down and kill it, because individual rats act quite differently to rat populations. So yeah, it is. And if that had been a pregnant female, yeah, it would have been very, very tricky. So yeah, it's much easier and better to prevent them getting there in the first place.
And if I may ask, you described a lot about the rat problem. What are the relative risks with the other small mammals that you mentioned earlier, the stoats, mink, feral cats, hedgehogs? Are they perhaps less a concern or not?
So yeah, it depends on the island. Yeah, we tend to focus on rats because they're probably the main risk and the most likely one that you can kind of engage people with. Yeah, like things like the mice can obviously swim shorter distances but could stow away more easily and are trickier to get rid of as well. And things like the stoats. So in Orkney at the minute, they're carrying out a stoat eradication because stoats did manage to get to Orkney in some hay, I think it was, some agricultural supplies, and they've caused a real problem for the ground nesting birds up there. So yeah, that is a very real risk. Yeah, but you're obviously less likely to get them probably in your hand baggage for a, you know, a tourist visiting a seabird island, say. And then hedgehogs and stuff, so they were introduced to the Outer Hebrides. Somebody wanted them, I think, to keep their garden slugs down, and decided to introduce some pet hedgehogs, and they've caused chaos out there over the years. Obviously hedgehogs are in decline on the mainland and we all love them because they're adorable and want more of them in our back gardens, but on these islands where they haven't historically been present and species haven't evolved to cope, you know, with predation by them, they cause real issues. So yeah, there are risks from all of them, and we do work on all of them, but we tend to talk about the rats more. obviously feral cats is a whole political minefield.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions, please?
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Kathy. Yeah.
So Tessa, is it just you on the project for the whole of Wales and Ireland?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So yeah, these people shown on the screen here from left to right. So there's Jacqueline, who covers England. Then there's Karen and Laura, who are like the expert advisors. So they also work on eradications around the world, as well as biosecurity for the RSPB. They're permanently employed by the RSPB. Carrying out that advisory work. Then there's myself covering Wales, Northern Ireland. Then there's Holly, who covers Shetland and Orkney, because there's a lot of seabird islands off those islands. And then there's Sarah, who's covering the whole of mainland Scotland, and Tom, who's managing the project. Right.
So it was a question to find out if there's more we can all do to help, really, because clearly that's a big job. You've got a lot of people you need to speak to. I live near Holyhead Harbour, and I've actually seen one of your signs, I've now realised recently. So I just saw it in the presentation. But just observationally, I have been on boat trips around Wales, and I've been to Ramsey probably about 10 years ago and been told to check my bag. I remember.
Oh, yeah. Because they carried out the eradication work there, so yeah.
Right. Yeah. Whereas,
which is
sorry
great.
to speak over you then. Whereas up here on Anglesey, I'm not going to name any names, but I have not once been told to check my bag, and I've been to seabird colonies.
Yeah.
So it'd be really nice to have that, be armed with information to help, really. And I don't know if there's other people who are near ports who might have felt the same. So I thought I'd just raise it.
Well, I was going to say, if you know of places that could hold like our posters or leaflets, like I'm happy to send them out to people, or if you know of like articles that I could write or presentations that I could give elsewhere, or any help would be gratefully received. And yeah, I can't wait to get the volunteer team set up and get some more people on board. But yeah, it really does involve everybody. Being aware and spreading the message, really. Yeah, that'd be great. So let me know.
I'll definitely try and help you, yes, but I'm going to mute.
And feel free to tell off any seabird island folk who aren't doing what they should be doing.
Well, Maud, it'd just be really nice to, I think all this stuff that you have made is really inclusive, and the videos are great and all the infographics are great, and I think getting some of the boat operators into that would be fairly easy. It's just reaching them in the first place if you're just one person. So
yeah,
I will do my best.
So I have started work with the boat operators on Anglesey, but I only spoken to them a few times this year. So I'm hoping to organise like an actual training session with them, like I have done with other boat operators. So hopefully that will be at the start of spring next year. So yes, it's not other people's fault, really. It's just a lot of work to do, and just slowly plodding on and getting the message out there to everybody. But yeah,
absolutely, well done. Anyway, we'll see you when you
do.
Thanks very much, Kathy. Any other questions?
It's for you, Nigel. Just a couple of observations and thoughts. I mean, really, one is I know that a number of the boat operators in Anglesey are really promoting the opportunity of seeing puffins from their boat trips off Puffin Island. So, you know, if that rat problem gets more of a problem, they're not going to have puffins to take the clients to sea. So there may be a real indirect or direct benefit to them for taking on these messages. I mean, certainly a lot of the boats operating out of the likes of Menabridge and Beaumaris do trips up to Puffin Island, and I'm not sure to what degree they've engaged with it. The other one, which is
they were really positive, and
more locally to me. I mean, Amloch Port. I know that there are rats that are seen at Amloch Port, and I know there are boats there that do service some of the research work on Middle Mouse, where the gannet colony is being established, and probably up to the Skerries. So again, I've not checked, as Kathy has, about whether there's actually any signs there, but you know, there's obviously quite a number of working boats out of that harbour as well, fisheries. So again, that might be a useful place to target because of the servicing work they do out there. The presentation fascinating. I didn't realise that statistic at all about there being 4 times as many square miles of sea in Britain's control as the landmass. That was a bit thought-provoking, but no, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, great, thank you. Yeah, I had that is on my to-do list as well, is to chat to the boat operator who goes out to Middlemouth. Yeah, but there's kind of endless people that we can communicate with, but we definitely want to just keep, that's why we want this project to continue and this be the start of everything, so that it can become more like the norm.
And certainly kayaking off the Anglesey coast is popular, and it seems to be growing in popularity. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy up in North Wales about the likes of jet skis and the proximity to some of the seabird colonies.
Yeah. Yeah. So
is there any hope? I mean, some form of exclusion zone might actually have a double benefit, mightn't they?
Yeah, I mean, well, from a disturbance point of view, that would be brilliant, wouldn't it? I have been working with the police on Operation Seabird Cymru, getting our message out together about that. Yeah, I guess jet skis are a lower biosecurity risk, but yeah, definitely a huge disturbance risk, and it does sound like there has been a big problem with that in North Wales. So yeah.
It's just a general issue, the proximity, isn't it, of vessels to some of the islands?
Yeah. And we just need to reduce like these pressures that seabirds are facing that are avoidable, because there's obviously some issues that we can't, have an impact on as easily, like the avian flu and climate change. They're obviously bigger and slower issues to target. So when we have something like biosecurity where we can do something actively, or disturbance, then it's really positive if we can do that, isn't it?
Thanks for your question, Martin. Thanks for your very thorough answer. Tessa, any more questions for Tessa?
I'm noticing some fellow RSPB folk and hiding.
There's nothing in the chat at the moment.
Okay.
Feel free to.
Nigel, can I ask? I suppose the other thing is actually with changing climates, it's getting warmer summers and things like that. Is that going to be more of a risk in terms of longer breeding seasons for some of these things?
What, for things like the avian flu?
No, for the for rats and various other things.
Right. Yeah, they're pretty good at breeding all year round anyway.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it could, well, climate change will impact biosecurity though, with things like the increase in storms and stuff, causing potentially more cargo spills, like those shipping containers that came off that container ship. So it definitely will impact it that way. And yeah, it will impact, it would allow invasive predators to breed like more year round, but they're pretty good at doing it anyway. So probably
Tessa,
more affecting some of the more remote islands in Scotland.
Can I just ask you to detail a little bit more about the rapid incursion response hub that you envisage for Anglesey, whether it would have a physical base as such, and what sort of skills and numbers of helpers would you be looking for to make it a realistic and effective unit?
Yeah, so it's going to be set up at the NRW offices at Bryn, I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, sorry, Bryn Mycog, is it? MWCOG.
Oh yeah, is that at Cortadrenion, Bryn Mycog?
Yes, that sounds correct. I haven't yet visited. I'm going to visit in 2 weeks' time. So that's where the physical site is going to be. We're hoping to get up a volunteer team of about 40 people ideally, so that there would be then at least like 6 people available to respond at short notice. But aside from that volunteer team, we also want, because there are like researchers anyway that visit some of these islands and people that work in the area and stuff, so we want everybody to be involved in keeping their eyes out. that way, and checking surveillance devices on these islands if they're going to islands. But then this incursion response team, as well as helping with that, they would be specifically working on the incursion response. And it is like really intensive process that's required to respond to even just like one individual invasive predator. So you set up a grid of bait that's 50 meters apart over an area around where the signs have been seen, and then you have to keep monitoring that for a 6 to 8 week period, and ideally daily. So yeah, we imagine that, yeah, if you had 6 people, they obviously wouldn't be able to commit to the whole 8 week period at short notice, but you'd hope that you would be able to maintain that number through having the larger volunteer team.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
And then it would be great for them to also help with education and awareness raising in the area as well. And yeah, we're hoping that by creating this network of 8 of them around the UK, we'll connect them all, and there'll be a bit of a kind of camaraderie between everybody.
Great. Yeah.
Gareth in the chat is asking, how long do you think the eradication of rats on Puffin Island will take this time?
I'm not sure. It'll take an awful long time to organise. So to get things right and to follow best practice, which I don't think was even in place back in 1999, the main part of the work will be the planning side of things, which is why I guess they haven't rushed into it so far. Yeah, but the actual process should just be one winter, so hopefully next winter. Yeah, and then you have to wait 2 years to be officially declared free of rats.
And Janet is asking, have yacht clubs been canvassed, and also the sailing schools and the centres on the Menai and at Port Heli, for example?
Yeah, so I've been trying to contact yacht clubs and outdoor education centres, but yeah, I still have a big list of places to contact. So yeah, pop any specific suggestions in the chat, and I could write them down and make sure they're on my to-do list. That would be helpful.
Great.
I think I can see the chat now, can't I? Yeah.
Yeah, so the chat's set to everybody now. It was just during the talk that we muted it. So
thanks, Gary. Well, whilst you're thinking of some contact points, and before we give a vote of thanks, can I just draw your attention to next week's talk, which continues the marine theme, when Emma Tiernan from Birdwatch Ireland is talking about terns of the Irish Sea, both on the east coast and the west coast of the Irish Sea Basin. So there'll be a lot of overlap of interest in what we've heard this evening, but a real focus on terns, for which, of course, Anglesey is fabulous. So we look forward to that as well. Well, we look forward to your talk a great deal, Tessa, and we weren't disappointed. Thank you very much. This was a wonderful shop window for your worthwhile Biosecurity for Life project. Thank you very much for explaining it so clearly. And also, I think, giving us lots of scope for involvement. There was lots of new information and new ideas about how we can help minimize invasive problems on these important islands. And you set the scene so well by really so clearly showing the value of the British Islands for seabirds. And some of those figures were really quite salutary in what an important global position the British Isles has for seabirds. It really is of global importance, and therefore here within Wales, we too have a global responsibility for ensuring that they remain in good condition. And I think the way that you've explained your project made it also clear that we each have a role to play, whether it's simply by sending you suggestions or getting our hands dirty and getting involved in the eradication process through the unit that you just described, for example. But I do hope that as a group, we can really help you either in as a sort of passive way or a direct way, each and every one of us. So please, my appeal to everybody that's listening this evening is to take up Tessa's request, get in touch with her, and we'll repeat her contact details on a flyer to you, so that we can each contribute in whatever way is appropriate. But there is a great deal at stake and a great deal to do. I'm so pleased that you and your team are operating, and I just wish there were more of you, and I'm sure funding is never easy, but really it is so worthwhile. And I think the more people that you have behind you, the more moral support, as well as I think eventually financial support, you'll gain. So good luck, Tessa, with everything. We look forward to keeping in touch with you about the success of your project, and as I say, being very much involved with it. And thank you for such a good introduction to the topic this evening. So bless you for joining us this evening from South Wales.
Interesting speakers coming up. You have a very good talk program.
Well, we have Kathy to thank for that. You're right, it's a fab talk program, and we've been very lucky to get off to such a marvelous start this week and last week. So thank you very much for contributing.
And Zoom would give you an opportunity to join